high in the jagged spine of the Bitterroot Mountains, where winter clung to timber like a curse and silence pressed harder than any law. Elias Crow lived alone in a hand-cut cabin built from grief and muscle, a mountain man long forgotten by the world and content to return the favor, his beard frost-thick. His eyes sharpened by years of watching for wolves that walked on two legs, his days measured by traplines and the slow breathing of the land. Until the morning he found her hanging from the slanted roof beam of his cabin like a warning nailed by God himself, a blonde woman limp in the pale dawn, her hair tangled by wind and ash. Her wrists bound with rawhide rope, and burned into the pale skin of her collarbone were two words carved deep and cruel: Apache lover, blackened by fire and hatred. The smell of scorched flesh still faint in the air, as if the mountain itself recoiled at what men had done, and Elias froze not from fear but from recognition. Because he had seen such markings before in lower valleys where men feared what they did not understand, and in that instant the loneliness he had chosen shattered like ice under boot. Replaced by an old, dangerous oath he thought he'd buried with his wife years ago, an oath never to look away again, never to let cruelty pass unanswered. And he climbed the roof with hands steady as stone, cutting her free, catching her weight against his chest as she gasped, alive barely, eyes fluttering open, blue as thawing sky. Filled not with terror but a fierce, wounded defiance that struck him harder than any blade, and he carried her inside, laying her before the hearth, stripping away the ropes. Seeing the bruises on her arms, the scars that told a story of pursuit and punishment, and when she woke fully, she tried to sit, tried to fight, whispering in a hoarse voice that they would come back, that he must not help her, that helping her would mark him too, and Elias answered with the first words he'd spoken to another soul in years. Telling her no one marked what was already claimed by the mountain, that she was safe now whether she wanted to be or not, and when she finally slept, exhaustion pulling her under. He studied the burn on her skin and felt rage coil slow and deep, because this was not justice or law or even war, this was cowardice dressed as righteousness, and as the storm closed in outside, Elias prepared for company he knew would arrive with rifles and lies, men who believed the word Apache was a verdict, men who would not care that the woman's name was Clara Hayes, that she had once been a schoolteacher from Missouri, that she had crossed the plains chasing freedom and instead found herself accused of loving the wrong man. A crime punishable by fire in territories where hate wore a badge, and when Clara woke again, stronger now, she told him everything in broken pieces, how she had helped an injured Apache scout named Nayland years before, how gratitude turned into companionship, how companionship turned into understanding, and how understanding was enough to earn a death sentence from men who could not stand a woman choosing her own heart. And Elias listened, jaw tight, knowing too well how mobs worked, how they convinced themselves they were righteous as long as they were many, and when the first rifle crack echoed from the tree line at dusk, he knew the mountain would test him again. Not as a hermit, but as a man willing to stand between the innocent and the fire. And as he loaded his long rifle and barred the door, he told Clara that if she stayed, she would have to trust him completely, and she met his gaze without flinching, nodding once, because when you've been hunted by lies, truth feels like shelter even when it's made of rough timber and old scars. And as the wolves howled and men gathered below, Elias Crow stepped back into a life he thought he'd escaped. Not for vengeance, not for glory, but because some sins must be stopped at the edge of the mountain before they crawl any further, and in that cold, flickering firelight, two broken souls found themselves bound not by rope or hatred, but by a shared refusal to let cruelty have the final word. And if this story stirred your heart, night fell hard over the mountain, thick with snow and intent, and the men who came climbing were not lawmen though some wore badges, not hunters though they carried rifles, but something far worse, a crowd convinced they were right, their boots crunching like judgment on frozen pine needles, their voices rising in drunken courage as they shouted for Elias Crow to hand over the Apache lover and step aside if he knew what was good for him. And inside the cabin, Clara listened with her back against the wall, every shout reopening old wounds, her fingers trembling not with fear but memory. While Elias stood between her and the door like the mountain itself had grown shoulders and chosen a side, warning them once calmly that no one would cross his threshold alive. And when laughter answered him, he fired a single shot into the snow at their feet, not to kill but to remind, and the mountain answered with echo. A sound so vast it swallowed their bravado for a heartbeat, long enough for doubt to flicker, but hatred is louder than doubt when fed by numbers, and the first shot came back, splintering wood near the door, and from that moment the night erupted, bullets tearing through timber, glass shattering, smoke and firelight dancing like ghosts as Elias moved with the practiced calm of a man who had survived winters that killed others, firing only when necessary, each shot deliberate. each one a lesson carved into the dark, while Clara loaded ammunition with bleeding hands, refusing to hide, refusing to be silent again, and when a torch hit the roof and flames licked upward. Elias knew the mountain was giving him one last test, stand or burn, and he chose movement, opening the back hatch, pulling Clara into the storm, guiding her through a narrow ravine only heck knew. Snow swallowing their tracks as the mob howled behind them, the fire consuming the cabin that had once been his refuge but was never meant to be his grave, and as they climbed higher. Shots fading below, Clara collapsed, her strength finally giving out, confessing through sobs that she was tired of running, tired of surviving when others decided she should not. And Elias knelt before her, gripping her shoulders, telling her survival was not cowardice, that living was sometimes the bravest revenge, and when dawn broke pale and cold, they reached a hidden ledge overlooking the valley, where smoke still rose from the ruins of his cabin and men searched like ants who had lost the scent. And it was there that Nayland appeared, not as a ghost, not as a myth, but as flesh and blood, wounded yet standing, having followed the chaos from afar. Having never abandoned Clara though the world said he should not exist, and the three stood together in silence, understanding passing without words, because love does not always demand possession. Sometimes it demands protection, and Nayland revealed that the Apache band had moved north, beyond the reach of those men, offering Clara safety among people who judged by actions, not scars. And Clara wept as she thanked Elias, knowing paths were splitting again, knowing some connections are not meant to be owned but honored. And when she touched the burned words on her skin for the last time, Elias told her scars were not brands but maps, proof of where you had been and what you survived. And as she left with Nayland into the trees, Elias remained on the mountain, alone again but no longer empty, watching the sun climb over peaks that had witnessed cruelty and courage alike. Rebuilding not just a cabin but a purpose, because the mountain remembered who stood when others burned, and stories travel even where men try to bury them. Whispers of a mountain man who chose mercy over silence, and a woman who refused to be erased.